Zululand, including Kagiso.
702.
Education.
My guest is Dr. Deonita Damons, Director at Boston City Campus. Dr. Damons, so good to speak to you again. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Aubrey, and thank you for having me, and also good evening to your listeners. It's been a while.
It has been a minute. Thank you so much for... I didn't realize I was talking to you tonight. Anyway,
surprise.
Indeed. Thank you so much. So finding a job is a full-time job, I'm told. And worse still, if you are inexperienced, because as you probably know better than I, there are always the provisions that say, yeah, you know, you can come and join us, but you need to have so many years experience. You need to have a car. And those are usually very, very, very prohibitive conditions to meet for many young people that are looking for a job.
Oh, absolutely. It's the age-old catch-22 where you have the qualification but no experience, or you have the experience and no qualification. So either way, it's quite a challenge to find that opportunity where you actually have both. And many graduates, especially recent graduates, would have that dilemma, and they will be facing the dilemma when they go out into the workplace, which if you think about when, I'm not sure you want to give your age away, Aubrey, when you and I graduated, we already had a side hustle that we were busy with since high school that provided us some form of experience.
What do we do with all of these realities, Deonita? The reality is that, yeah, people might have gone to school for 12 years, did the degree for 3 years or 4 years. They now have these qualifications. We've told them that that's what you need in order for you to go into the mainstream of the economy, and suddenly they are met with these realities, these barriers to entry that are, quite frankly, insurmountable. How do we deal with this? How do we help these young people?
I think the most important thing that we must do as a society is give them access to information, because I find that sometimes there are opportunities for young people, whether it is school leavers, whether it is graduates, that they can venture into, but only if they knew about it and if they knew about it in time. So there are so many initiatives that are being implemented, especially for school leavers, especially for newly graduated students, or for newly graduates, where employers are looking for them because there is an incentive on an employer to now take on this new graduate. So it is important that we make sure that they have access to information to where they can find these opportunities, where they can gain the necessary experience they would need for them to effectively enter into the workplace.
Are there enough jobs, do you think, to absorb the should we call it the sheer numbers of youngsters that are leaving tertiary education or perhaps leaving high school to go and find a job? Does the South African economy have enough spaces to absorb those people?
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately, our economy is not growing at the rate that we would like it to grow. We don't have many businesses starting up and flourishing and employing people. And therefore, we should also change our view in terms of what employment should look like, or what a successful career should look like, and venture into becoming your own employer instead of for looking for employment. So there should be ways of us to try and, as a society, address this problem of unemployment by looking at different ways of employment, or maybe rephrasing what employment mean, including teaching young people, graduates, school leavers, that the only option is not to be employed, but what about being an employer?
So we have an economy that doesn't have enough jobs to absorb what we are churning out of our institutions. We have the barriers of entry into the mainstream economy. We have the fact that there are sometimes issues of unemployability, just in terms of the fact that people might not be adequately trained for what the commercial world requires, just in terms of competence and capability. Because if I'm a young person looking for a job, or any person looking for a job right now, and I'm listening to all of this stuff, it sounds to me like it's an impossible task. What do we do?
Well, first of all, I think we must also just take a step back and understand that we have so many graduates, and maybe the type of graduates we have, we should change the focus of that graduates, because we also have so many positions that are not being filled, because all of a sudden we realize we don't have qualified and competent people for those specific careers.
Yep.
Or those professions. So maybe that is also a review or relook that we need to take as business, as higher education institutions, as government, to say that these are the programs we should be driving, because these are the jobs we should be needing. And maybe then we'll take a pool of the graduates and get them employed. But what I would say, and there's a national career service portal that is available to all South Africans. And here we're talking about learners, students, parents, professionals, where they can go to, and they will find a list of sites that they can access that could help them gain these specific opportunities for them to get work experience. So, for example, if they go to the NYDA, they will be able to go through processes where they get invited to interviews as individuals with no work experience, so that they can get into an employment at one point or the other. Then you also have the Department of Employment and Labor. I hope I'm saying that right. Department of Labor, where there's different employment services centers that have been set up for young people to go and register. Again, if they had access to this information, maybe that is a way for them to get into the workplace and get that work experience.
Give me a call on 011-883-0702 as I speak to Dr. Deonita Damons, director at Boston City Campus. We're talking about the harrowing process of trying to find a job these days in our economy, in the realities that we all face. What are some of the challenges that you faced? Give us a call, 011-883-0702. And if you've succeeded, what do you attribute your success to? I'd be interested to hear that. 011-883-0702. Looking for a job is probably one of the most important things that anybody can ever do, because that's how you find meaningful expression, I suppose, in life, because you are a member of society that is contributing, that is perhaps making a difference in one way or the other. And so the process of looking for a job is beyond just the economics of it. It's also existential. It's also it's existential. So for many people that are trying to find a job, Doc, that can't, I imagine the psychological impact, the negative psychological impact of that is immense.
Oh, absolutely. And if you were brought up with the idea that you should be the breadwinner, it is so much more profound on you because of the impact and your, I suppose, a sense of failure, a sense of being a failure, and that has impact on how you interact with other individuals, and it also impacts on your confidence, which means when the opportunity does come around, you will not be confident enough to actually step into and take over that role. So it is important that while you are looking for employment, you also engage with other people and make sure that other people understand where you are, but also seek assistance. If you look at the various centers that there are out there, if you're a graduate, there's an institution called Higher Health that you can reach out to, and they could assist you. There's also the free hotlines where you can phone in and maybe they can assist you through your process and through your trauma, because I think it's a very difficult experience if every single time you submit an application, it comes back as no. So you stop submitting because you expect that it would be a no. But just imagine it is a yes. Just imagine how that would change your life. I think the one mistake that most applicants make is they make one CV for every single position that they apply for. And that doesn't speak to the position that they apply for.
Doctor, do people still read people's CVs? I mean, do they really? I know of stories, and I'm sure you've also heard of these, where certain departments in government will put out an advert to say that we want to employ 6,000 young people. And then, lo and behold, those 20,000 young people come with their CVs. And then the next day, CVs in piles and piles are found in the dustbins outside. Do people still read CVs?
I'm going to speak from my own experience. I actually do.
Okay.
So I really do hope that somebody takes the time and effort to read through a CV, but they're not going to read through every single CV.
Yeah.
And they're going to read through the CV that grabs them and captures them from the first page. So you're giving a 10-page CV, depending, of course, on the type of job you're applying for, that you must be able to grab the attention of the recruiters within your first page, because they're not going to have time to go to the next page to find out who you are.
Yeah.
And I think it takes so much time to space out who we are and where we live and and how old we are, instead of concentrating on the information that the recruiter is actually looking for. So do they still read CVs? I would like to say yes, because I still do. But they only read the CVs that make it to the final cut. Yeah. So it is important that if there's a specific spec, you follow the spec, you make sure you keep all the documents that's been required, because if one thing is out of place, you're not even going to make it to the phase of your CV being read.
What then should the CV look like? What should it read? I mean, I remember a time, and I'm sure you'll remember this, when we'd have like borders on our CVs and like little patterns and right, and the idea was to try and make it as appealing as possible. But I sense that might not be the way to go now. What substantively? What should the CV say, look like in the first page in order for it to pique the interest of the job giver in the way that I'll get an interview?
Well, that's why it is important that you cannot have a blanket CV for every single job, because you have to look at the job spec. And within your first page, you should be able to demonstrate to this person that's reading or that's going to read your CV that you actually possess or have the possibility to fulfill the competencies that they're looking for or the performances that they're looking for. So within your first page, you must be able to relate to this person that you are unique and that you have the capabilities, and this is why you have the capabilities. So depending also on the type of position you're applying for, make sure you have your handles, because that's important. Because they might not read through your whole CV, but they would be interested to see, do you have a social media presence? What do you post on social media? And that's why it's also important that you are very careful of what you post on social media. But they do go into those things in more detail. So in your first page, make sure you speak to the requirements of the job, but also give them something to look into that might find you more appealing than the other applicant.
I host programs on this platform about entrepreneurship almost every week, because I really am concerned and maybe a little disillusioned about the idea and the prospects for jobs. And I'm disillusioned, but I also understand that not everybody can be an entrepreneur, right? To what extent do we have a conversation that balances the need for jobs, but also the opportunity that is created by entrepreneurship, particularly as a result of the advent of ICT, AI now? How do we balance that, Doc?
I don't think you get a definitive balance, because it's going to change with generations, and it's going to be situational. So at this moment, everyone is very employment driven. Like, I want to be an employee. I want to have an employment. And we think that being employed with a big corporate or anywhere is the ideal. When I look at how young people are interacting and are becoming entrepreneurs merely by doing what they enjoy, which I didn't even know that content creating was something that you enjoy. And that's a different form of employment. So maybe we should start looking at not tolerating, but understanding the different type of employment, or the different type of entrepreneur that we're going to get in the future, because it's not going to be the typical entrepreneur, it's not going to be the typical employer, and it's definitely not going to be the typical employee either.
I want to take some calls. Vince is in Pretoria. Good evening to you, Vince.
Good evening, Ralph. Good evening to your guest.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the listeners. All I want to ask is, every time the employers want us to apply for that employment, right? So why is it that every time people they want hard copies, even though they know that you have passed matric? Why can't they go, like, they create a system whereby, you know, they themselves, it can link to the department whether to find whether your matric certificate is genuine or not, right? And the other thing I want to know is that why is it that employers before, they used to send us messages to say your application was not successful or not. But the most important one is to know why is it that employers always want hard copies from us, like you must go and do certified copies, what are we not moving to AI world where the employers themselves, they have to find out whether you are sending legit documents, because there are people coming from outside our country where they don't even know those people whether they're qualified or not, because, you know, the people are sending certified copies of documents. Some people are even faking documents that they see little matric certificates. So I want to understand and want to know from the guest right there, what is it that are they doing since we are moving to a AR world? Thank you very much.
Vince in Pretoria. Networks of shared information, such as where we can corroborate the authenticity of matric certificates and any other, I suppose, qualification, asks Vince. But why do we need hard copies in a world where we are so advanced technologically, Doc? Why should we have hard copies, asks Vince.
I think it's institutional, organizational. Some organizations would accept digital copies, and some would insist on hard copies purely so that they can authenticate, further verify that what you send them could be the authentic document. I mean, we would, I don't think institutions go thus far as to having an expert on site to verify whether it is, but I think the perception that if it's hard copy, it was more difficult to falsify than you changing or editing a digital copy. I think that's why they insist on hard copy sometimes.
John Hofmeyer.
Some courts still...
Yeah. So go ahead, Doc.
No, I'm just saying that some institutions are migrating to a more digital platform, but not everybody's there yet.
Yeah, I would corroborate that. I think that the Department of Home Affairs in South Africa is leading the charge, and they're not entirely successful as yet. But I know that it would appear that because of the virtues of ICT and all of those kinds of things, you'd expect that the migration to that kind of technology would have happened a long time ago. Unfortunately, the reality is that those resources are sometimes prohibitively expensive, but also there might not be the expertise that have been developed in various departments, not only in government, but in the private sector to be able to do those kinds of things. So those are some of the practical realities. John Hofmeyer in Craig Hall Park writes, he says, here's a trope. Employment agencies find people for jobs, not jobs for people. Doctor?
I think that's because the employment agency is employed by the employer to find them employees. So the purpose of the employment agency is to find the job and then find the employee, because the employer you would not necessarily know that there's a position at a specific place. But if you register with an employment agency or they find you to ask you to send their CV, their job is their client's job, and the client is always the person that's going to possibly employ the candidate. So employment agencies serve as an employee seeker for an employer, not the other way around. So yes, I know the whole recruitment sounds different, but yeah.
This person says, I'd like to remain anonymous. Says, I've worked for very big multinational FMCG food and beverage companies, and I've seen the same pattern. I've worked in KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, and Gauteng. In my current company at a site based on the Eastern Cape, we employ over 40 unemployed learners without experience, but we always lose at least 50% of the learners within the first 6 months, simply because these learners cannot adapt to the working environment. Most go AWOL and complain that they cannot adapt to normal working life in a factory. There are opportunities out there, acknowledged, although not enough. There are a significant number of unemployed youths that are not willing to take up opportunities. How real is that, Doc? That perhaps, and I know this is something that happens generationally. I mean, I remember that when I was young, the generation before us would say, you guys are just not built the right way. You're just weaker. You're a weaker type of person, or whatever the case may be. And I suppose it's something that happens every generation. But there are significant noises that say young people, Generation X, Generation Z, and all of these generations are somehow not tolerant enough of the grind. They're not tolerant enough, and they therefore don't develop the grit that is required. And this is perhaps corroborated by by Wonganjinga's comment on X. It says the search and inevitable rejections can be emotionally and psychologically exhausting for young people, but they must not let this consume them. Keep going, keep learning, keep abreast of development in your industry, and keep sharpening your skills. I can almost hear a young person saying, listen, dude, I just don't have the time. I don't have the luxury of the time to just keep going and keep. How do you deal with that reality?
Oh, wow. You know that we create an expectation in every child's mind that we take through an education system, that when they finish this, they're going to have X.
Yep.
When they finish, they find out that X is it's non-existent. To some, to others, they're fortunate enough. But to the majority, X is non-existent. So when an opportunity comes along, they do not see that as a possible step to X. They could do that as this is not where I wanted to be. And later on they realize maybe they should have gone because they would have reached X as well. So when young people drop out, they probably drop out because they didn't expect that, because nobody prepared them for that. We expect them to just understand what it is. No one took the time to actually prepare them that these are the alternatives to if you not get to X. So I hear what individuals say, and I mean, I work with a lot of people that I place on internships, learnerships, through our graduate support services. And when they say to me, I didn't want the job, I always ask why. And it goes back to, but that's not what I studied for. And it's about saying to them, yes, you studied law and this is a call center. Can you not see how law can be used in a call center? So I think we need to just understand that sometimes they say no because they really don't know how what they did fit in there, or how they're going to do is going to fit into their life journey. And once you take the time to explain to them, you might have a different approach they might have a different approach to the opportunity they get presented with.
Mfundo is in Pretoria. Good evening to you, Mfundo.
Good evening, Praops.
Yeah, go ahead, Mfundo.
To your guest. Yes, I wanted to contribute on the issue of CVs.
Yes.
By saying that I agree with your guest there that the first page must be able to catch the attention of whoever is reading a CV. And I want to equate that to a situation of an executive summary in a business plan.
Yep.
If the executive summary encapsulates all that will be there in the rest of the document, usually whoever is reading the CV then turns to page 2 to see more about this potential, what you call, employee or applicant. So we must teach ourselves and our young ones the ability to craft a reasonable, shall we say, executive summary of the CV, no matter how short the CV is, but it must have an eye-catching or attention-catching executive summary up front.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Mfundo, couldn't agree more, Doc.
No, I absolutely agree with you. That is your 5-second pitch. If you can't get somebody's attention with your 5-second pitch, you're out the door.
To what extent, Doc, I've heard this said many, many times. To what extent does the CV sometimes not serve the purpose of informing the reader how I am going to be helpful to you, right? Versus I need a job. I have family responsibilities. I'm poor. To what extent sometimes does the tone of the purpose of my wanting a relationship with that company sabotage the chances of that candidate because they are telling the truth, right? That I need a job, I'm the only possible breadwinner, I'm the only graduate in my family, and I really... Versus, this is who I am, this is your problem, and this is how I can solve it.
I would say the latter would obviously get to the next level of the interview or the recruitment process. The former would not. In the sense that if you showcase this is who you are and this is what you can do, that's most definitely going to grab the attention. I really am desperate for a job should not be what you highlight in your CV, because that's not what they're looking for. It is unfortunate that that's how the world works, but you need to show what you can do for the company. You might bring up in the interview, because they would ask you, why did you apply? And you could say, I have the capabilities and I also have. So that should not be the driving force. And I know it sounds
insensitive,
weird, but it's almost like yes, but it's almost like I always take this, draw this analogy to the fact that the person that walks into the bank that's the most well-dressed is probably the one that needs the most money.
Yeah.
The person that walks into the bank very relaxed is the one that has the most money. So they don't give the one the money that needs it, but they give the one that don't. So that is also what you need to show in your CV. Even though you want it the most, you need to show why they need you the most.
In many an evening, I get calls from people that want us to assist them. And fortunately, we get a lot of people assisted by the 702 family who are either looking for a job or just looking for some help. And we encourage people to ask for help, right? But what I find quite recurring is that the tone of the assistance for help to find a job most of the time might inadvertently be the thing that makes you not get the job, because it comes from a place that says, I have a hard luck story. I'm in a bad situation and I will take anything. I will take anything. Emotionally, I understand that narrative. But it might not necessarily work in the ears of somebody that has the power to give you employment. Does that make any sense? Doc?
It makes perfect sense. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. You know, the unfortunate thing was let me give you a story. I had an interview a while back with a graduate.
Yep.
And when I asked the graduate about his interest was in solar energy and renewables. And the position he applied for was an administrative position only.
Yeah.
But he wanted the job. He would take anything for the job.
Yep.
And then I wanted to say to him, you will not be happy here. You're never going to be who you want to be here. But that made me realize that I can't put him here because he's not going to last here. The minute an opportunity comes up somewhere else, he's going to go.
Yes.
So I'm going to invest
and that might not be good for you as a company, right? Yeah.
And then the person leaves. So it sounds insensitive, like you say, but the employer wants what the employer needs. So unless you give the employer what they need, you're not going to get that foot in the door. So although it's very hard, you need to take that step, that one step, every single time you go for that interview. And unfortunately, put on a brave face and give them what they need. How you feel will be better if you at least get the employment. But I don't think many employers are going to go with the fact that you really, really need a job and they want something specific and give you that opportunity.
So perhaps the mindset, the mindset of the job seeker needs to be properly calibrated for the space in which they want to enter. One, I'm hearing you say that understand that you are looking for a transactive relationship. You want to give of your skills, your labor to that particular company, and in turn they give you that remuneration. The idea must be for you to show them why you are the right person to give that opportunity to. Not to say, I need a job because life is hard. Life is hard. And your story might be true, but you're not necessarily responding to the need of the person that needs to give you a job, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, but and I think in there lies the ability of you to showcase to the employer how resilient you are. So instead of saying I'm poor, saying that these are the things I attempt as an individual, and that forms part of your experience. So you're absolutely correct. Your mindset, you need to reframe your mindset every single time you go for an employment interview, every time you apply for a job, to have the mindset of I need to give them what they want, otherwise I'm not going to get what I need. And with that comes the fact that you can then showcase what you have to go through to make it as part of your experience.
So what you're saying is that you take that reality of being perhaps in a difficult situation and you use that to showcase your grit, your resilience, as you say, and that might be the thing that makes somebody stop and look and say, hey, if this person is able to go through these challenges, then it probably means that they are going to be able to deal with the pressures of this particular job.
Correct. So take what you have and make sure that that is what grabs their attention when they read your CV.
But what you are saying is that stay within the course or the line that explains to the prospective employer why you are the best candidate for the need that the employer has.
Well, like you said, we've got a very high unemployment rate. I think 4th in the world, based on the 2023 stats. If you want to be one of the millions, you need to be sure that you are the one that grabs the attention and are the most unique. The only way you're going to do that is by showcasing why they should choose you.
What, in your experience, was the most eye-catching CV that you've ever read? I don't know if you'd be able to remember maybe some of the words or maybe the thoughts or sentiments that were expressed. But what was it about a particular CV, Doc, that made you say, I'd like to give this person a chance for an interview?
The fact that the person I was reading, it was a standard first page about your demographics, where you come from, etc. And I went to the second page, and the person was a newly graduate, never worked a day in their life, but they put down all the places they worked at as a gardener, as a housekeeper, all of that they did through their studies. And that grabbed my attention, because I'm saying to myself, this is a young person. They do have parents, but they decided to go out and find employment. And when I asked the question why, they said they wanted to learn what it feels like to work.
Wow.
And I thought, well, how can you not let someone like that get an opportunity? So it
okay,
was,
I would have wanted a second opinion. I mean, a second interview with that person. What did they say? They said, I want to know what it feels like to work.
And when she went on, you understand why. She said she grew up with a grandmother, and the grandmother was very old, but the grandmother always worked. Even when they had very little, there was always something something nice. And the grandmother says, no, you must work hard. And she said when she growing up, she realized she wanted to know what it feels like to work, to be like her grandmother. So that was very touching.
Yeah.
And like I said, the other day, this is another story. I looked at the CV, and the CV was for us to provide someone with a study opportunity. And this person has been at different institutions and they never completed. And for me, that tells me that if I take you in, you're not going to complete either. So there's certain things in your CV that give certain triggers to somebody looking at your CV. So be mindful of how you put it and when you put it out there, because those are the triggers that I would look for.
Have you ever received a CV from somebody who was eminently qualified? I mean, really, really, really well qualified, just in terms of credentials and so forth. And then upon reading the CV, you thought, I don't want this person.
Okay, I thought you were going to ask a different question.
Have you?
No, I haven't. I thought you were going to say, and I couldn't employ this person because she was so highly
Tell me about that.
Qualified. Okay. Yes, and I thought to myself, it's a waste to employ her in a position like what we have. So I didn't put her CV through to the position that she applied for. And I phoned someone. I said, listen, I've got this fantastic person. I know she didn't apply. Would you like to take her? And she's like, okay, let's have an interview. And we had a Teams interview, and there she's gone. And she's got a senior job for the one that she applied for. So it also depends on the recruiter and the company. If I see somebody that's too qualified for the position, I'll try and find out if within the organization, especially if I like the CV, isn't there a position I can take this person to? But yeah, that was a good feeling. That was a good feeling.
Absolutely. Your final word on this, Doc. It's a reality that the jobs are scarce. It's a reality that we are in, I suppose, a different world to when you and I grew up. What is the message that you send out to people who are seeking a job as a general sort of comment to them?
Listen, they mustn't give up hope, but they must grab the opportunities that there are. If you don't know about where to go, you can go to your nearest Department of Employment and Labor. If you don't know where to go, you can go onto the National Career Advice Portal. Aubrey, I'll send you the email address for that. And they can also give you an indication of lots of internships, learnerships, apprenticeships positions you can apply for, because that at least gives you an income and it gives you a foot in the door. So if that is not something you want to do, find out if there's short courses you can do if you're able to.
Upskill, yeah.
Reskill yourself, upskill yourself, because your qualifications and skills might not be what the market needs right now.
Yeah.
So look at what is available, look at what is in demand, and see if you can meet those demands or those competencies, and go for it. As I said, just imagine if they said yes.
Absolutely. Dr. Deonita Damons, great talking to you again. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. How do people get in touch with you?
www. I don't have a www. It's deonitad@boston.co.za.
deonitad@boston.co.za. Thank you so much for joining us, Doc, and
It's
really
a pleasure.
appreciate your time. Let's take the news do we take a break?